if you could just, just recap for me what your goals are with cybersecurity and, what you're looking to get out of learning pen testing.
The cybersecurity, if my goal, okay, there's two. The first one would be Web3. I want to get into that. It's something that's completely new. Even cybersecurity, I think it's completely like something that's barely taken off. So I would like to position myself in a way where whenever it's available or more common or like for me to be ready, like work-wise, experience-wise, and pen testing. It's the ability to be able to work remotely. Basically, I would like to move to like Mexico and live off with, because I've known people over there that are from over there, and they say with $40,000 US over there, it's a great life. So it's like,
Yeah.
So if you could work remotely, go over there and then make more than 40 grand, like you'd be set.
Yeah. And actually, I think I've said this before, but like most of my team is in Mexico, actually. So, and I work for like a pretty major, like Fortune 500 company. So even within like the large companies out there as well, you can find remote jobs like that as well. And, I mean, obviously if you're doing like Web3 and stuff, then yeah, certainly like the location stuff won't matter too much. But, so right now, so pretty much what you're saying, what I hear you saying, right, is you're good with what you're doing right now, but you're just trying to position yourself to make a move down the line, in the future if you want to. Is that what you're saying?
Like, so like I would, if I could start tomorrow, like if I knew everything already, right, and I would just do it.
Okay.
But I would move to a position where okay, so I don't really know how. I know that you said that there's web pen testing, that there's like network something. So I would position myself and start getting experience to where I would think like, okay, this probably would help me with Web3. Like if I learn this now, once Web3 comes out, there's more work, or it's just something that's just obviously going to be the new thing or the new type of web. I want to be ready or have some experience that I could relate to it, so that way I can make that jump,
Okay.
So,
yeah, I will say from what I know about the Web3 stuff, it is pretty unique actually in terms of like the skill set of it. I would say what you're doing right now, if you want to get into the Web3 security, what you're doing right now is actually the most optimal thing. And that is learning how to write smart contracts, how to program the smart contracts and stuff like that. All the stuff you're doing through Josh's course, because I think we were talking about this on his live stream as well recently. But like the way that you find vulnerabilities on the Web3 stuff is that you have to have a solid understanding of the language that they're writing the smart contracts in, usually Solidity. For some of the projects, you'll see Rust as the language. Like I know a lot of the Polkadot stuff is written in Rust. But basically, you're just looking through the source code and you're looking through the code and finding bugs in the code. And right now, like there's not as much automated tooling stuff built out for it yet. I mean, there is some stuff, and that's stuff it will get better over time. There'll be more tools and stuff, as especially now. That's been like the super hot thing in the security community lately. Like I was saying earlier, it's just like so many people, so many like security professionals are starting to do exactly what you're doing right now, and that is learn how to write smart contracts and stuff like that, because it's a very necessary skill for that line of work.
Yeah, well, that's good then.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, for sure. So let me just to get a better understanding. Are you more interested in being a Web3 developer or, the Web3 pen testing, like, looking for vulnerabilities in Web3?
Honestly, I haven't decided yet. All I know is something Web3. The way I see it now is like, I'd rather just learn both sides.
No, for sure. Yeah. No, I
And
think that's a really good idea.
when I took your course, this last course and Josh's course, like naturally I could tell like I'm more comfortable around the web pen testing stuff because it's an
Okay.
actual program. It's similar
Yeah.
to web dev. It's just that, or development. It's just that development has those. I get those moments where I'm like stuck and I just go in circles. So I was doing like right now I'm stuck with this React. I was trying to like insert a, a function into a return to return it. But then I did the whole thing and then I figured out, wait, I'm doing the same thing if I were to just put it in there. And then I put it in there and it refreshes. So it's another issue. So it's a lot of banging your head against the wall trying to figure things out. But I think it's because I'm learning still. Like I'm still in what Josh calls tutorial. So that's probably half the problem. But it's just a lot of trial and error, I think.
Absolutely. And just to give you more clarity on that, is that's something that never goes away, honestly, because that is learning. I mean, it's not the most glamorous thing to, I mean, a lot of people that experience that have tried to, they try to learn programming before or try to learn pen testing. Everyone's had that experience. And it would be nice to say, like, oh, yeah, eventually you won't experience that anymore. But that's not true at all. I experience that every day because a lot of that is what learning is in these fields. Because, like Josh, he says all the time, like, when he goes to build something, he might not necessarily know like how to do it. He might have to Google stuff. He always has to Google stuff, right? We always, like, even everyone that knows how to code, they're constantly just like looking stuff up as well. Because you're not going to remember how to do everything and you're going to get stuck, and that's part of it. And for pen testing, speaking from like the cybersecurity side, that essentially what you described is pretty much what hacking is, because if you think about it, at least with programming, I say this sometimes, but it's like, at least with programming, you're trying to do something that you're supposed to be able to do. With hacking, a lot of times you're trying to do something that you're not even supposed to be able to do, really. You're trying to exploit something, right? So naturally, that's going to be pretty hard. And there's a lot of ways that could go wrong, errors you can encounter and things like that. And a lot of times you're going to be encountering stuff that you're completely new to. Like almost every day that I sit down and pen test something, I'm encountering something new that I haven't seen before. And I got to figure out, how do I go from knowing very little to nothing about this to learning something and instantly applying it in order to hack the technology, whatever I'm trying to do. So that's like a huge part of it as well. And eventually you get more comfortable at doing that. I think there is like a macro skill to it as well, where you get a little bit more comfortable in that uncomfortable feeling, I guess I would say. But it's always going to kind of be there. I mean, that's actually a good indicator that you're learning something, when it feels like a challenge to you. It might not feel like the smoothest process to go through it, but if you take a step back, you realize that you are progressing, you are learning stuff. You look back on a project you did and you're like, oh, well, before this project, I didn't know this thing and this thing and this thing.
Yeah.
And basically the whole process is just building upon that. But what I was going to say earlier is I feel like you're definitely going about learning the Web3 stuff the right way, because you're learning the security side, and you're interested in the security side, and you're learning just how to program on it too. So that is like, you're stumbling your way into like the perfect route, I would say, for that, because like you're learning how to program on it first, which is really key with any technology, like with any of the cybersecurity stuff. That's why, like, in this last course, right, we first started, we didn't jump straight into the hacking. First, we tried to understand like how the internet works, how to use what requests and responses look like and stuff like that. And we covered all the baseline material because before you can hack it, you have to understand it. And same thing would go for any technology, Web3 included, right? Before you can hack smart contracts, you got to understand like what they are, how to write them, how they work. And I think that most people will not learn the security side on that, the people that want to be developers on Web3. And I mean, that's why you've already seen like these major projects get hacked, and it cost them, in many cases, it cost them the entire project. It was just toast after that, right? Because people lost confidence in the product and they didn't trust it, you know, and they lost billions of dollars in a lot of cases. And the fact that, you know, so much is at stake for these Web3 companies, that's why they're paying so much on these bug bounties. We're talking about earlier how there's bug bounty platforms out there where they're paying up to $10 million for a critical finding. The reason they're willing to do that is it's worth it to them, because that's still a small amount compared to what they could lose if they were actually exploited by a malicious hacker that stole all their funds or whatever they're able to do with the vulnerability they found. And, you know, most people that are wanting to become Web3 developers, just like most people that are trying to become Web 2.0 developers, right? They're going to focus explicitly on learning how to build the thing. They're not going to focus on the security aspects of the thing. So the fact that you're already aware of, like, you know, security issues and you're planning on learning the security side of this is going to help you a lot, even if you decide that you would rather be a Web3 developer, because when you're building these projects, you can build it with the security aspects in mind. And a lot of designing, you know, technology and stuff is you want to design it with security in mind from the beginning, from the start, because it's a lot easier to build a secure application when you have that in mind than trying to add security on later down the line. So this is going to, like, even if you build like, you know, you become a developer, you're going to develop way more secure code. I think it's going to benefit you all around, no matter whether you decide to go on the cybersecurity side or the development side for that.
Would you say, because you mentioned that like when they develop apps or crypto in general, they don't really think about the cybersecurity side, especially since it's so new, right? So that means that in the future, there's going to be a lot of vulnerabilities that are going to like come out with the type of crypto that's already out there, I imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you think about it right now, I mean, I'm sure Josh probably says just how much of a new frontier knowing to develop in Solidity is, right? Like very few developers are competent in Solidity and developing smart contracts. Now, going back to the conversation that we were having, you know, off the recording, what I was telling you was that even if you look at traditional, you know, Web 2.0 and networks that have been around since, like, you know, the dawn of time at this point, right? Technology that's been out there for super long, right? You look at the biggest companies, top 500, top 100 companies in the, you know, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, you would think that they'd be super secure, but, you know, you get hired on one of these companies, you come to find out, like, wait, they just created their security team like 2 years ago, and their program is just so like new. Everyone's so new. And most of the pen testers, you know, they have a lot of new pen testers, have a lot of people that are just figuring it out, and they're dying for talent, you know, in the pen testing side and stuff like that. And just keep in mind, like when we're talking about this, most of these companies do not have any kind of, they're not integrated on the blockchain quite yet. I think eventually they will be, but we're talking about technology that's been around for, you know, tons of years now. Like the network stuff has been around at least since like the 60s, right? And the web dev stuff, you know, websites as we know them today, web applications, they've been around for quite a while now, Web 2.0, and they're still finding vulnerabilities in those things all the time. So if you could imagine how few people understand how to develop the Web3 stuff, understand that out of that subset, even fewer people understand the security side of that. It's like the new frontier of the new frontier. So yeah, I think that you're going to see, especially now that, like I said, there's such a huge movement for it within the security community of people interested in Web3 security, finding bugs in Web3 applications and stuff like that, whatever you want to call it. You're going to get a lot more people flooding into the space, and that's going to cause, like, you know, you're going to find you're going to see a lot more vulnerabilities coming out for this technology as time goes on, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, you could give me a little bit insight since you work on the red team side. Because at work, I mentioned that it got hacked and it's a huge company. Um, does the red team attempt to like phish you, like in the emails, or
Oh
is that
yeah,
literally? Oh, okay, okay. 'Cause I had a,
absolutely,
I had
absolutely,
a
yeah.
feeling. Yeah,
Yeah,
I had a feeling.
so it really depends. Now, some companies do what's called an assume breach scenario, where basically what they say is with that, the reason they do is assume breach, some companies, and for some engagements, is that they're like, okay, look, we know that you're gonna get in eventually. If you fish enough people, someone's gonna click the link, someone's gonna plug in the USB or whatever your campaign is, right? They know eventually you're gonna get in. So to save us time and to save you time, here's some credentials on the network, and just start on the network and see where you can go from there. But a lot of the campaigns are involve phishing, right? So they start from a completely the perspective of an outside attacker, right? Because with the red team, it's threat emulation. So there's what are known as advanced persistent threat actors. So these are basically well-known hacking groups that are out there. And usually the way it works is a company will say, we want you to emulate this particular APT. And there's actually a bunch of publicly available information on these different threat actors. Like you can see in a lot of cases, like what companies they've targeted before, like what they've went after, what tools they've used even. And usually you're trying to emulate one of those. Not always, but usually that's the case. And, like I said, you're normally starting from an outside, because what the company wants to test, the whole purpose of it from their perspective is they want to know, like, okay, if we were targeted by this threat actor and they were able to get into our network, how well prepared are we? How quickly could we detect them? How quickly could we lock down our stuff? And what amount of damage would be done? So that's the whole value of what a red team brings. But yeah, usually you're starting from the outside, and you basically, what's pretty cool is you pretty much can get in by any means necessary in a lot of cases. Obviously, there are certain rules and things that are in scope and out of scope, but a lot of times you have a lot of free reign. So one of the most common ways, like you said, is phishing emails.
Hmm.
And so yeah, they'll design a campaign, a phishing campaign, see if they can get someone to click a link. And another common one is in, like anything involving macros on like Word docs or Excel docs. So if you ever open up like a Word doc or Excel doc, something like that, and it says like, oh, enable macros to view the whatever, don't click that, because usually the macro is to gain code execution on your computer, and that's how they get a foothold in the network as well. Another way is USB drops. So this is very popular for people that work in an office. Is a red teamer might put a virus on a flash drive and just randomly drop it in the parking lot or somewhere in the office, hoping that someone sees it and is like, oh, I wonder what's on here. You plug it into your computer and they instantly have access to your machine. So those are some common ways they can initially get in.
I haven't found a USB at work, but I do get a bunch of phishing emails. And
Okay, yeah.
some of them are very, well, I don't know if it's an actual legit person trying to get in or if it's the red team, but they look legit. And the way I know that they're phishing is because if so many people like flag it, it just
Yeah.
comes out as a like a little warning before you even like click on it. Um,
Yep.
I just like to look at them whenever I'm at work and I
And
get
that's
them.
part of the security controls that like the red team is testing there as well. When they design the phishing campaigns, they want to see that the company has some kind of uh, defense in place to flag it, like you said, because that's one way they can help harden the security, is if they're able to detect that, hey, there's a phishing campaign being conducted against us. Don't click this link or whatever. Um, so yeah, all the things and that's the key distinction really between the pen testing and the red teaming. With the pen testing stuff, we're more focused on testing the technology. So for example, in the web app pen testing course, as you might have noticed, we were really focused on testing like the websites, you know, looking for as many vulnerabilities as we could possibly find. And that's normally the focus of the pen tester is like, okay, how many vulnerabilities can I find? And, you know, what are the most critical things, especially that I can find on this application? Whereas the red teamer is instead focused on not testing the technology per se, but testing the people and the processes. So how good is the defense? Like how quick could they detect us? You know, what kind of damage could I do if I got in on their network? And, you know, what are the processes they have in place, right? Attacking the people with social engineering attacks and stuff like that. And yeah, like you said, some of these, I mean, any like really solid threat actor nowadays, they're going to have a very convincing campaign. And it's almost to the point, I would honestly say it is to the point that if someone really wanted to hack you, they could quite easily. Because if you look at especially some of the more high profile stuff, I know we talked a little bit about ransomware off the camera. But yeah, with ransomware, especially like if you've ever seen like the government organizations or high profile people that have been targeted, it's pretty insane. Like how would you possibly avoid it? Because what they do is they conduct what's called a spear phishing attack, which what you described earlier with those emails, that's what you just call a regular phishing attack, which means that they have some kind of email that, you know, maybe it's kind of targeted towards you, but it's kind of targeting the masses, right? The masses at your company or whoever they run it against. But with a spear phishing attack, it is specifically targeted for that individual. So what they're going to do, especially this is easy to do against high profile people that have a lot of stuff about themselves out there on the internet. What they're going to do is they're going to do a bunch of recon. This is what's known as OSINT, open source intelligence gathering. So it's basically like they just look through different sources like social media, anything they can find on the person, figure out like, you know, who does this person know? Like what are their interests, things like that. And they might impersonate maybe someone that person knows, or maybe they'll send like a phishing email that's specifically targeted towards their interests. Like, oh, I know he's interested in this, or I know he, for example, this is a pretty crazy story. There's another red teamer. It's like a big content creator. Probably a lot of people that are watching this will know what I'm referring to here. He was recently on a live stream and he talked about on a phishing campaign, how he was able to fish his way into a company. This is pretty crazy. This is how far that a real attacker would honestly go and how far he went on this engagement, is that they were trying to fish their way into this company that, you know, his red team was testing, and they weren't able to get in after a while. So what he tried to do is he found an intern that like just got hired on to the company or whatever. He started going through and like really deep diving into the open source intelligence gathering on this guy. He found out like what college he went to. He found out he found some girl that like went to his college that he was confident in, that they never met each other. He emailed the guy pretending to be the girl. And like he was having several email exchanges with him and like earning his trust and stuff like that. And it was like, oh yeah, so I saw you around class. I know we never talked, and like blah blah blah. And like basically he was like winning the guy over, and basically winning over his trust. And then at a certain point he was just like, hey, look, I saw that you recently started working at this company. I've been really trying to get a job there. Do you think that there's any way you could send this resume over to the recruiter? Like, here's my resume and like blah, blah, blah. Because what he tried to do before was he tried to go directly to the recruiter with the malicious Word doc that had the macro on it to gain code execution. But what they did was they were really smart and they said like, oh, can you send that as a PDF? Because with PDFs, it wouldn't work. It has to be like a Word doc. So instead he went this route where he won over the guy pretending to be some girl from his college. And it was like, oh, by the way, I really want to get a job in the company you work for. Is there any way you could send this to a recruiter? And so he sent her resume, the Word doc, over to the recruiter, and then he opened it, and then he got access, initial foothold into the company.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, how badly do you want it?
Yeah. And I mean, in all honesty, like a lot of people would say he went pretty extreme there. You always have to go that far. But I mean, yeah, that's just to say that, I mean, certainly a real threat actor, depending on if they really wanted to hack you, they would go to that extent, first of all. But yeah, I mean, that's what's pretty cool about it at the same time, is that there is a lot of freedom and flexibility on like how far do you want to go. There are boundaries, of course, but you could do a lot. Like there's some red teamers that have done physical red team stuff as well. So like, for example, when I used to work for this automobile company, the red team there, I wasn't on the red team at the time, but one of my friends was, and they would go to the manufacturing plants sometimes, and they would show up with like the vest and the clipboard and pretend they were like a factory worker there. And they got into the facility, and then they would plug in like Raspberry Pi devices to start like stealing stuff off, from the plant and stuff like that. And they would see like how much, what they could do. And they would gain, they would have a USB, they plug it in the server room, they would get access to like the servers and stuff like that. And they would just try to see how much damage they could do, basically, without actually damaging stuff. But when I say that, I mean like, gaining access to different machines, pivoting around, or whatever their goal was for that red team engagement. Normally based on who you're trying to emulate, you'll have a certain goal you're trying to do.
Is red teaming that fun? Like you actually, like your job is to pretend to be a worker and actually go in there and like see some guy pass by. It's like, oh, do you have access to his door? I'm trying to get here.
Social engineering. Yeah. Some people do phishing, where they call people up on phones as well, pretending to be someone else to gain access to something. But yeah, I mean, not all red teams do that. It really depends on your company, right? Especially, I think now that a lot more people are remote, teams are remote. There's definitely a lot of remote work opportunities for red teamers as well. And in that case, you wouldn't typically be doing the in-person stuff, but maybe you happen to live close to one of their facilities, and they might send you in there to like drop a USB on something. Like my manager was telling me that story. He's like, yeah, when he was in Massachusetts, they had like an office near where he lived. And as part of the red team engagement, like they sent him over some files like, hey, put this on a USB and try to walk it into the, and he had a whole, in case he got caught, he had something written up by his boss, obviously, that would authorize him to do that. But yeah, he was able to do that. And it is that fun, in my opinion. I mean, I always like, I remember growing up, going to like different festivals and stuff like that. I remember there was somewhere they had like these play reenactments and stuff, and you could be on the villain side or you can be on like the good guys. I like always pick the villains. I just thought it was like way cooler. And I remember growing up, I would always root for Tom over Jerry, and like I would root for like the villains in all the shows. I don't know. I just think it's really cool to be able to emulate an attacker, because basically, if you think about it, it's essentially a way where you're able to do like illegal stuff in a completely legal way. And it's like, there's no other way to do this, right? I mean, it's really cool, the fact that you're actually able to earn a living from this, in my opinion. This is like my favorite area of the offensive security stuff, obviously. But
yeah, that's probably one of the I mean, the pay, like getting that remote, getting paid really well. It's just, I think that's probably what everyone trying to get into this is like their main reason. Getting paid really well and remote work, and you can work at your house. You want to go somewhere to a coffee shop or whatever and work there. You got that freedom.
Oh yeah. And I think even for red team, especially, there's going to be a lot more remote red team stuff. I mean, obviously I do red teaming and I do it remotely, fully remote. So especially now that everyone's migrating to the cloud as well, that's another one of those big technologies. Kind of like the cryptocurrency thing, where it's like, yeah, this is not going away. After 2020, where like so many more companies migrated to the work from home model, you're seeing like more and more migrations to the cloud, like AWS and Azure and stuff like that. And there's even ways to like, migrate your Active Directory into Azure Active Directory. So yeah, that's going to be a huge area for red teamers and pen testers as well. But what I would say, just to clarify it to you and anyone watching, obviously, is that with pen testing and red teaming, yeah, they are technically there's distinctions between them. Like I said, there's a difference between red teaming and pen testing, but at the same time, it's typically, now some companies do have like a dedicated, all you do is red team and all you do is pen testing kind of setup. But a lot of times what I've noticed in companies is that there's a huge cross between them. Like, for example, I do red teaming, but I also do pen testing. So the way it works is my team has like 20 something pen testers, but out of that, there's only 3 people that do the red teaming, 3 or 4 people doing red teaming within that. So it's like when we don't have a red team engagement going on, we're just doing pen testing, which I really like because that's cool. It mixes it up. Whereas if I was like, say, a developer or something like that, I would have a certain project that I'm working on. Maybe it's a certain web app or a certain, if I was a Web3 developer as well, right? I'd be working on a certain Web3 project. And obviously, eventually, most likely, eventually you'll switch to a different project. But you have a much longer period of time where you're doing the same thing. Whereas with pen testing and red teaming, it's like I'm always doing different stuff. If I'm working on an assessment, maybe I take a web app assessment, a web app pen testing assessment 1 week, and then the next week, maybe I take like a network pen test assessment. Then maybe I take an API assessment. Then maybe I have a red team engagement. So I'm constantly getting to do a bunch of different stuff, and it just keeps it fresh and exciting for me.
It changes, like the work type changes, where that's true. In developing, it's just keep on going till you get it done, basically. And then a new project starts. It might be a little bit different, but you're still kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely opportunity to do different stuff in programming, but I do know at the same time, I do know developers that have been like, man, I've been working on the same crap for like 10 years, 5 years. Now, obviously you can always look for new jobs and stuff like that, but it is something could happen. Yeah. On the day to day. Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you for your time. Hopefully this was of help to you.
Yeah, thanks, man.